This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland front of the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. It feels so good to be back talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers. And joining me today is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, bud. I see that you've reverted back to, I'd say mid-2019, Justin, with the open window, with the sunlight just pouring through, messing with the color temperature of your feed. You did say you were going to tease me at the beginning, so I had to come right. I had to start out on the offensive.
I'm happy you did that. Well, in reality, it's that we're going late, and now it stays bright. It's not the eternal darkness of Winnipeg right now. So
yeah, you get about
mess around with the shades.
About 90 days a year of that.
Give or take a few. But before we get into all of this, we do have so much to talk about. I am really excited to dive into Cavs basketball. I think a little bit of time off was helpful, was needed. But we do have to mention something incredibly sad, which is the passing of Nick Gilbert. Died at 26 years old, complications of NF. And I mean, it's heartbreaking. I offer my heartfelt condolences to the Gilbert family. Obviously, this was a prominent member of the Cavs family overall, and I want to kind of acknowledge that they have asked that donations can be made at nf4detroit.org/donate. We will have that in the podcast description, but again, we spent a lot of time talking about escapism, basketball, things that don't really matter, but at the end of the day, family is the most important thing, and I just want to extend my heartfelt condolences to the Gilbert family.
Me as well. It's just a tragedy, man. 26 is, I mean, that especially as we, get into our 30s, and he's just a kid still.
Mm-hmm.
My heartfelt condolences go out to the Gilbert family. You're not supposed to lose a brother this young. You're not supposed to lose a son this young. And, just all the love in the world to that family, because they're going through something that's so unfair. So, rest in peace, Nick Gilbert. Man, just terrible news.
Yeah, you're completely right. And there is no way to properly transition. So we're just going to transition. I'm not going to try to make this into a Zoom reader or anything like that. Again, the link to donate is going to be in the podcast description. But I think a good place to start off with the basketball portion of this here podcast is talking about the New York Knicks getting eliminated by the Miami Heat. I did not have the chance to talk with you and Nam. Really appreciate you filling in for me, or Nam filling in for me, I should say. But I was kind of the opinion that I would have liked to see the Knicks go for a run in the playoffs. I would have liked to see them beat Miami. I would have liked to see them give Boston a tough series, because then we could sit here and be like, did we miss something? Was this team a little bit better than we thought? And instead, what we got was kind of what I think was our correct read at the start of this, which was the Knicks are who we thought they were. I was correct in saying that I'd rather play the Knicks over the Miami Heat. I feel justified in that.
Yep.
And, looking back at that series, like at the end of the day, the Knicks were the better team in that they played better throughout the series, but the Cavs really beat themselves. And it happened at so many different levels, but it's watching that series just really reinforced it. And I'll let you get into the stats, Carter, because I thought you had a kind of good thread on this. But like Jalen Brunson played much better against Miami than he did against the Cavs. The Knicks overall offensively played much better against Miami than they did against the Cavs. But the Cavs offense, not their defense, was ultimately what let them down in the series.
Yeah, I'll just I'll rattle off the numbers. I'll start with Brunson, because the way the Cavs defended Brunson was under such scrutiny. A lot of people looking down their nose at JB going to the pre-switching, which Spo did in the next series and got a lot of positive credit for. And you just look at the numbers. Brunson and Cleveland averaged 24, 5, 2.5 turnovers a game on 44% shooting from the field, 29% from three, and only 4.4 free throw attempts a game. And he's one of the best free throw merchants in the league against Miami. A full 7 points per game better, 31 points per game, 6.3 assists, only 1.8 turnovers, so more assists, less turnovers, 50.4% from the field, and 35% from three, and got to the line of a full 3.3 times more per game. So, as much as I think I tweeted that just because I'm still seeing a lot of discussion about this team's struggle on the defensive board, struggle. A lot of slander going JB's way for the defensive scheme. And don't get me wrong, there were things I did not like about the way that this team schemed. I do think the strong side help was way too strong, and it allowed Mitchell Robinson a lot of offensive rebounds. But to me, those are nitpicks that I would still be nitpicking, but we're just talking different if the Cavs have a 110 offensive rating, Yeah.
I thought you were on the money that they didn't have to be dramatically better. Like Donovan Mitchell could have played at his regular season level, and that probably would have really extended the series. What did we say?
Justin, the reality is if they matched the Charlotte Hornets 30th best regular season offense, they would have had a better offensive rating than the Knicks, and they would have likely won the series. And the reality is they could not match that. And
it wasn't any one guy. That's the thing. You could point in so many different directions, and
I think that's why. Real quick, I'm sorry. I think that's why people are focusing in on the rebounding so much, because it's this big glaring scab to pick. And trust me, if you don't think I was punching some couch cushions over in the Rodriguez household as Mitchell Robinson grabbed offensive board after offensive board, and then as Josh Hart snuck in and while the Cavs perimeter players ball watched, of course I was. But ultimately this is where it's really important to get away from the pound of flesh type of thinking, and what the franchise can't do, and what the franchise has to do is remove the shame and the frustration of getting bodied, and just look at the facts, and realize that the defensive rebounding thing should have been a thing that killed us in the third round of the playoffs, not the first. It should have been a thing that as your margins thin, you can't be a bad defensive rebounding team. Sure, they that felt like, and I still feel like that is a problem that needs to be addressed. But you just kind of have to look at what actually lost us the series, and what actually lost us the series was we couldn't score the ball. I'm not even saying don't be mad, because I'm still a little grumpy about how it all went down. Of course I am. This was a dream season.
And you look at Miami going to the conference finals. This was a prime opportunity, but at the same time, you look at how the Cavs performed, and clearly they weren't ready. Maybe they're going to have to work harder in the future. We don't know. There is an element of instability at the top of the Eastern Conference with, James Harden rumors. Milwaukee's got to make decisions with Chris Middleton and Brooke Lopez. Jalen Brunson, there's the rumors there. We don't know what the future is going to hold. And even if some of those guys change teams, they could just form another juggernaut in the East. But, if the Cavs weren't ready to take advantage of this opportunity, they weren't ready to take advantage of this opportunity. And it 100% was on the offense. Like I said, if Donovan Mitchell played to his regular season level, that probably would have been enough to extend the series. We said all year that the development of Evan Mobley was going to be really important, because what defenses can do against smaller guards needs to be broken by someone providing the playmaking, the short roll scoring, what you see from Bam Adebayo and Draymond Green with his playmaking when teams are trying to take Steph away. Evan Mobley, Carter, in the regular season, he averages 1.09 points per possession as a roll man in the pick and roll. Do you know what he averaged in the Knicks series?
I don't know, but I bet it's going to make me wince.
0.08 points per possession. He scored 1 point on 13 possessions over the series.
Ah!
Like
That's so much worse than I thought it would be.
It's very low. He didn't make a field goal as a roll man in the series. Like that is a glaring weakness. Darius Garland was passive at times. He had one of the worst games. He was like, even though he had an efficient series, he was 1 for like 1,000 in game 3. And all of those things went wrong. And the Cavs still, in a lot of these games, they had a chance to win almost every single one of these games in the second half. Some of them got away at the end, but they were in all of them. The defense was good enough to win. And I would feel more of kind of like an existential dread if we were sitting here and the Cavs gave their best punch. We felt like they played well and they lost to the Knicks. That was not the case. I'm not feeling like completely pessimistic about next year because that was nowhere near their best punch. They can play so much better than that. You look rattled still.
Justin, I need to make like a technical difficulties frame for the live stream with some elevator music because I am shook. That is horrible. That is comical. I can't believe that. Man, I'll tell you what, despite that, matches the eye test.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, man. I do think this was a little bit of a lesson in kind of, and chase down optimism haters will love this next sentence. I think it was a lesson in like overvaluing the readiness of our players. And, and I talked about this with Nam, even overvaluing a guy like Donovan Mitchell's floor, where, I think the biggest takeaway I had from that series is that, after years of watching a truly situation-proof player, Donovan is not situation-proof.
Yeah.
He needs things to be organized in a way that allows him to succeed, in a way that, sure, every player needs that to some extent, but like, the top, the top 0.001% of NBA super duper stars don't need that, like Jokic bends the world to his reality, right? LeBron bends the world to his reality. Speaking of another player who I think does not hit that bar, I think we just saw him get run off the floor in Game 7 and Joel Embiid. So it's not, it's not slanderous to say that I think Donovan needs that. But yeah, I mean, I think I definitely overvalued the readiness of guys like Evan, because watching Bam Adebayo in that series, it's like, oh, there's a long way to go. I saw someone tweet, like, would you be okay if Evan Mobley is where Bam Adebayo is now in like 2 years? And some folks kind of turn up their nose, and man, if he's doing what Bam is doing in these playoffs, more power to him on both sides of the ball. I think I even undervalued Bam compared to a guy like Mobley on the defensive end. In terms of just the force. The force that Bam plays with. I just don't think anyone on that Cavs front line matched that. And boy, I hope they're watching because there's a lot of good tape to learn.
Yeah, there really is. And I think Bam has even been a comp that we've gone to in the past when it comes to kind of developing at Mobley's playmaking, because he's not a Jokic-like passer, right?
No.
Like Jokic is in that conversation for greatest playmaker ever kind of thing. But I do think what Bam does offensively is something that Mobley should watch, especially because it came against the Knicks. I think that is valuable tape to have. And I will push back a little bit when you talk about kind of the floor of Donovan Mitchell. And I've been as disappointed in how Mitchell performed in that series as anybody. But when you look at the playoffs, I think you still see like Jason Tatum had 2 games where he was just awful. And this is going to happen in the future too for Cavs guys. Just because we have this experience doesn't mean we aren't going to see players that are much better than they perform in the playoffs have duds, right? Like that's going to happen. But a lot of these teams kind of have the infrastructure to win other ways. And the Cavs didn't have that. They are very top heavy. They needed Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen to all play at a high level in order to go out and win. And I think what we've seen in the playoffs is these teams that have made a consolidation trade, they lack that depth. They lack that ability to make up for guys having off nights. Even Kevin Durant having average games, he needed to be spectacular along with Devin Booker in order for them to have a chance in those games. And usually what we see with these teams is they are in that boat. And the ones that go far, it's because that top heavy talent just carries them. LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh until they eventually ran into Dallas. Usually you need that other transaction cycle, which we're now in this offseason, to kind of round out the talent. And of course, there's going to be pressure on the Cavs. I said it in the podcast with Mac. In today's NBA, you are constantly auditioning to your players to maintain buy-in. It's a relationship. JB Bickerstaff on his podcast with JJ Redick talked about how it's a relationship, and we're always making moves to guarantee buy-in. We're collaborating. We're trying to make this partnership work. This is going to be another one of those moments where we go through this transaction cycle. We see what they do to supplement the talent. We see what growth they make. And next playoffs, there's going to be real pressure on this team.
Absolutely. And I do continue to wonder just the way that these top heavy teams like the Suns, like the Cavs, I just wonder if we're just hitting an era where you just can't be this anymore. You cannot be a team that has 4 players you really, really can count on, and then everyone else,
Mm-hmm.
I just think that, Jalen Brunson is what, a top 30 player?
Yeah.
And he was by a country mile the next best player in this series. And but the gap between 10 and 30, I think, is probably smaller than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, like the team with 30, like normally 10 just used to, like, you had to have so much in your upper middle.
Is so much higher. The baseline is so much higher.
So like, I just think that if 30 is really close to 10 in the modern NBA, then they can't have the better player 4 through 9. Like that just, I think you used to be able to get away with. I mean, we literally watched this team get away with that in years past, where we were taking really flawed rosters into the postseason and just blowing teams off the floor that were really well constructed and had good depth, and none of it mattered because we had LeBron. I just feel like, we're just seeing that matter less and less.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean that players, 4 through 9 need to be real studs. Like Miami doesn't have that. Like I like their guys, but they're all role players that provide certain skill sets. They have the ability to play different styles, and I think that that's what's really important. That optionality just wasn't there for the Cavs. And maybe as you get more growth out of Mobley, where you can count on him more, that opens up another facet of your offense. Maybe you get growth out of Darius Garland, and that opens up. But I do think you want to have the role players that help you have that stylistic versatility, which the Cavs just didn't have. But you listen to Kobe at the end of the year press conference, and it really does sound like the core 4 is going to be back. JB is going to be back. I'm happy with this because honestly, I want to see another run of this. Like I don't want to have the knee-jerk reaction. I would feel icky about it. This front office has made moves that I didn't love, like the Larry for Lowry trade, and gave him the benefit of the doubt, and it worked out. But when it comes to this, you look at the playoffs now, and the teams that have gone far are all teams that have lost a playoff series where their star players did not play well, where they looked bad, where they looked shook. Bam has had playoff series where he's looked really, really, really tentative and hasn't made an impact on the game. Philly has had that. Boston has had that. All of these teams have had that. This isn't the first time that there's been buzz of breaking up Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, right? When they started losing in the first round after being a conference finals team, that came up. I want to see at least one more year where we're sticking to our guns. We're sticking to the team identity. Let's put the talent around this because we know this core 4 works and plays well together over the course of a regular season, not just a bad 6 days. And let's see where we can go from there. That's where I'm at. That's what I want to see. And I did feel better about where the Cavs are at after hearing that from Kobe Altman.
For sure. You don't want to panic. And you don't want to, again, going back to that pound of flesh type of thinking, like, you can get there. I'm not saying you can't ever get there. I think Monty Williams is got let go by the Suns for that reason. I think it was like, hey, we got humiliated twice. We got to do something, like whether you agree with it or not. Like, I get it. Getting run off the floor, having your season end, getting run off the floor at home 2 years in a row. I get it. I think you have to be really careful making pound of flesh moves, because it typically is using a hatchet where you need to use a scalpel. I didn't go to medical school, Justin. I was a journalism student. But that ain't no way to do surgery. So I think that ultimately, that is the right play. And again, I kind of go back to what I said with Nam 2 weeks ago, which is that when you have a big breakdown like this, if you try to solve every problem all at once, everything you saw, then you're probably going to be flailing in the dark a little bit. So I kind of keep going back to, they need to do the easy stuff first. The stuff that, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy to find great shooting and rotational depth with the Cavs, what they have, but as compared to give up on our core and start over, give up on our coach and try to panic find a coach when we weren't planning on finding one. Like, that all seems a little flail in the dark to me. So like, you have to be a little patient, even knowing that, the patience will run thin pretty quick. I think, I don't think that if this were to happen at the end of next year, that everyone would be all hunky dory about it.
No.
And say, run it back. But
like, I think a lot of people reacted to what Jason Lloyd was saying, but I think, like, when you look at it, when you get to the end of next season, you do have to make decisions. You have to make decisions on the core, because Donovan Mitchell will be extension eligible. You got to make decisions on what that means for everybody else on the roster. You have to basically kind of plan out the next 5 years. So, of course, everything's going to come under scrutiny. Even if they have a successful season, everything's going to come out under scrutiny. I deal with problems as they come up. And we have a long way to go before we are at, like, next off season. And just looking at where we were last year compared to now, it's a big difference. A lot changes in 12 months. And that's why I kind of, stick to the present a little more than that, which is why I thought it was a good idea for this podcast for us to kind of go over some of our big questions that we have for the next season. And I don't know if you want to kick things off, Carter. I'll let you go first. You're a little less rusty than I am, because I had the extra week off.
Yeah, I may be rusty, but it's never rusty, Justin. Support from our video conference software. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, Justin. A single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Justin, I will start with my big question after bogarting that ad read from you, because I thought it was a nice, healthy middle point of the pod.
I appreciate that.
My first big question is quite literally big, which is, how big do the Cavaliers want to be? They let Kevin Love go after the deadline. They, clearly planned on Dean Wade getting those minutes, and when he wasn't right, they chose to fill their last roster spot with Sam Merrill. And I just wonder, does this team want to invest more at the big position? Robin Lopez, and I think I'll hold an L on this one from an analysis perspective. I thought he would be both a great locker room guy and a guy who still had enough in the tank to help. And I think he was just kind of in a different phase of his career. And this is why you have to be really careful opining very strongly on end of bench players, though I was right on Howell Neto, Justin. Anyway.
Well, he was at a different stage of his career, and frankly, the Cavs were at a different stage of team building, because I think we shouldn't ever lose sight of this. Those decisions were all made prior to the Donovan Mitchell trade. They were all signings after that first run of free agency. Like Ricky Rubio only came like 8-9 days into free agency, where before that it was Cavs rumors about going after Kyle Anderson, going after all these other MLE guys. Cavs probably would have had a better shot at those guys and different types of signings if they knew they had Donovan Mitchell on board.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's definitely fair to say. But I think I'll still hold my L because I still really thought he would be an on-court contributor.
On you.
However, with that said, I'm very interested to see what kind of big they chase. You know, I would be very, very surprised if they use the mid-level exception on adding help at the 4 or at the 5. But I do think they, you know, speaking to that positional versatility, they didn't really have that upshift option. You know, it was really just Mobley, Allen, and then Danny Green was at the 4. Or hope Dean Wade gets healthy. And I wonder if they are going to invest early in chasing some 4/5s, you know, and that might even come from within the roster. But, you know, I think when Mamadi Diakite had really good games, you saw that archetype and go, this is an interesting little wrinkle for this team that they don't really have. You know, they don't have a Brandon Clark type. They don't have a kind of a bruiser energy big, you know, and I'm interested to see if that's an archetype they want to invest in, or if they want to say, hey, we're actually really confident in Dean Wade. He's going to get better. He's going to get healthy. And we need to invest more resources on taking shots on shooters at the wing or additional guards or whatever it might be. That's what I'm interested in, is like, what does that look like? Or do they just say, we like what we have, we're going to just get another, you know, strong vet that might be able to play if we're lucky?
I think a lot of that's going to be determined by what talent is available, right? Like, it's, if there's a player that's a 4-3 that's available for the mid-level exception or an assign and trade possibility, maybe that's the direction you go, because, hey, this does allow us to get a little bigger. And one of the things that I was thinking about throughout the Knicks series is, you know, well, last year we were playing 3 7-footers, but then I go back and I look at the data. When Mobley, Lowry, and Allen were on the court together, we were in the 7th percentile for giving up offensive rebounds. That lineup did not rebound well, Carter. But like, if you could get kind of that 4-3 that is able to provide rebounding, that is able to space
my
the floor.
question, Justin, I'm going to cut you off. My question is, do you need to chase a 4-5? Because there's a lot of roads, you know, to you know, signing 3/4s with your mid-level. Or maybe even trying to find one in a trade. But I think the 4-5 is an interesting conundrum to me. Do you invest in a pure backup 5, or do you sit, you know, to, you know, be your functional third string center when Mobley's not playing those minutes? Or do you downshift a little bit, but not so much that Dean Wade is your de facto backup 5 if Evan gets hurt?
Yeah, so the reason I went to kind of the 4-3 is because if they are able to get a player like that for the mid-level or in a sign and trade, I do think that influences your decision making here. Because if you got a guy that's able to play either at small forward or flex over to power forward, then you really want to invest in someone that's going to expect minutes at both the 4 and the 5? Like, you're almost, if that signing is playing minutes at the 4, Evan Mobley is playing the rest of the minutes of the 4, and that's kind of decided. So at that point, maybe you do say, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to invest in more of a traditional center, someone that's going to be able to spell Jarrett and will keep the power forward minutes that way. If in theory, I would love a guy in like the Brandon Clark mold. Like that would be terrific. That 4-5 that is able to eat some minutes and bring you energy and be that second unit guy, maybe up the pace a little bit. But I really do think that there's going to be some sort of chain effect on, okay, well, our big chip is right now the mid-level exception. Who do we get with that? And that's going to influence other decisions.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. You know, and I'm talking about probably, you know, biannual exception, minimum exception type players. I'm not talking about mid-level. I think you would be very silly to try to, you know, steal a Naz Reid. I think that's, even though it's a great player, that's not a good use of resources with what's available to your roster. But it is interesting, you know, like Because I feel like they've picked end of career guys to be that backup five the last couple years. Ed Davis, Robin Lopez, and I think what I'm interested to see is, are they going to get someone who's a little bit more? Are they going to go chase someone who's a little bit more springy, a little more juice? Because I do think that, first off, it was so clear that when Robin was out there, that they had to kind of change what they do altogether defensively. And I just wonder if this is just a team that's not going to have that bruiser backup five that is like the big slow drop coverage center as currently constituted, because everyone has to play so different. And when you with that position, you almost want just to be able to swap someone in that allows you to kind of play the same way, but maybe has a few more dimensions, a few more ways to go. Like if you need to stay big when and burly when Mobley or Allen need a blow. So that's what I'm interested to figure out, is kind of how big do they want to go? Do they care about that? Are they fine with their bigs, or did playing Danny Green at the 4 scare them a little bit?
Yeah. That ties into my question, which is, are the Cavs going to change their approach to the regular season? And one of the first things that jumps out listening to you talk about your question is, in the past, I do feel like they have really valued signing guys that can bring leadership on the bench. Robin Lopez, Ricky Rubio, Kevin Love, obviously. And looking at it now, I kind of feel like there's a moment where the torch needs to be passed, where that leadership really needs to come from Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, and Evan Mobley, right? Like, I think these guys need to be the leaders on the team. And that's not to discount the value of veteran leadership. I think you see that with successful playoff teams, but those are guys that can functionally help. They are guys like Al Horford, who is out there turning back the clock. It blows my mind that 5 years ago we could just put Tristan Thompson out there and Al Horford is no longer effective. And 5 years later, he's sunning Joel Embiid, right? Like, I do think that there's a value to that, and bringing back someone like, if you are able to bring back Danny Green, I that is attractive to me, because in theory, that's a guy that can help if he's able to get healthier, if he's able to get out there and shoot. He already showed that he can shoot. If he is moving 15, 20% better, I think that that's someone that can bring value on and off court. But I do think that on-court fit and ability to contribute needs to be important, because the leadership component has to be our lead guys. It has to be Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland more than anyone else on the team.
Yeah, we say it all the time, but your stars set your culture.
Yes.
You bring in vets for culture reasons early on in a rebuild, so you have some foundation. But guess what, buddy? Foundation's here. And
it's an example, right? It's an example for guys like Darius to follow, right? To help them grow into leaders themselves. I think there needs to be a passing of the torch at this point. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think, like, you talking about kind of that, they have to be able to help. I just think, like, looking at this Cavs roster in that Knicks series, there just weren't enough players. There were so many players on this roster that JB clearly was like, I'm not even going to try. That tells you something about his trust level. The fact that at the first sign of trouble, he had to go down to 7 men, and one of those 7 was Danny Green on one knee. You just can't roster. You can have 1 or 2 guys that are at the end of your roster that are like, hey, they're culture guys, they're great practice guys. You want those people on your team, but you can't over-index on it. You need to find good players, and like, you have to trust now. In my opinion, you have to trust the quality of the humans that you have at the top of your roster to say they're actually going to be our culture setters now. And they got punched in the mouth in that playoff series. I also, it's funny, when I first saw your big question in the rundown, I actually thought about our friend David Zavak's tweet about how, basically asking for any kind of explanation as to why, Okoro gets the minute load most of the year. He wins the starting job. Meanwhile, Jetty is doing the Jetty dance where he's getting in the rotation, out of the rotation, in the rotation, out of the rotation, and then at the end of game one, Jetty is out there on an island guarding Jalen Brunson. And I think I applied that question that you asked, aka how are they going to treat the regular season? I applied that to the coaching staff and their rotations.
That was the second part of my question. Yeah.
Because, like, I don't have a satisfactory answer for that question. Like, if you were going to pull the plug on Okoro at the first sign of trouble early in that series, or that you really, or that you were like, we might need Jetty in this spot. Like, you need to be thinking about that in February, in January, and be getting those reps.
Honestly, that's the core of my question. But what I was saying at the beginning was kind of tying into what you were saying. But I do think, like, looking at the remaining teams, and specifically the Miami Heat, I do think that they cost themselves regular season wins looking to try different things, trying to play different styles, trying to empower guys like Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, all these guys, so that when they get to the playoffs, they're able to go to different looks. Guys are ready for the moment. And I think the Cavs floor is high enough with the talent they have. They were near the top of the league in player games missed this season. Knock on wood. Thank goodness there was no major one for any of the core players. But overall, like, they did not have a lot of roster continuity throughout the season. I do think as these guys get better, as they make improvements to the roster, the floor is probably going to be 50 wins, no matter if they want to experiment, if they want to play around. I think they're still going to go out there and win 50 games. So I think having guys throughout the rotation really sticking to kind of a philosophy of, we want to develop these players because we know that we have a fastball. We know that playing our stars heavy minutes together is going to get us a lot of wins. That's great. But at the end of the day, the regular season wins don't matter as much as your ability to play multiple styles, to have guys that you can go to have other pitches within your arsenal, to develop Isaac Okoro and have him be more of a part of the offense where you do feel confident. Like, to answer David's question, I would say in that specific game, Okoro got elbowed in the head. Jetty came in. They made a run. So they stuck with the lineup that made a run. Like, that's something JB and coaches do all the time. But I do think it was touching on something that's important, which is we didn't experiment with other styles. And I don't know if that's personnel or if that's just kind of the philosophy they had. But I do think that that is a relatively easy change to make. I just want to see more experimenting throughout the course of next season.
I think the fair critique at the macro level is, you cannot have the first time all season that Jetty is on an island against the team's best opposing player guarding a point guard, which I do not think he did all season. I do not think he was matched up against a point guard once during the regular season. It can't be the first time in game one of the playoffs. I think that's a very fair criticism of the game plan, because it's really not as much a criticism of the game plan. I don't think David was like, I can't believe Jetty's out there, because I thought Jetty did okay on Jalen, and I think David's one of the biggest Jetty fans out there. I think David would say, why is this the first time we're seeing this? And I think that's 100% fair criticism, and I think that is the number one way where I think this coaching staff needs to coach to the postseason, even during the regular season.
I think we showed, and he's ridiculously good, in my opinion of him, has elevated throughout the course of these playoffs, but I think we showed too much respect to Jalen Brunson. Like, the pre-switching that didn't work for the Cavs, I think some of that had to do with, okay, we're still blitzing with Jared Allen. We didn't trust kind of Darius to stick with Brunson, and I know Brunson hits shots on Darius, but I thought he did a good job sticking with him and forcing him to hit kind of those mid-range shots. Like, you will live with a lot of those makes, and that's what Miami did. They lived with Gabe Vincent on Jalen Brunson. He had a better series overall, but everybody else didn't go in. They were in position to get those defensive rebounds. They were in position to end those possessions. And yeah, it helps that when they do the guard-to-guard screening with RJ Barrett, that it's Jimmy Butler coming over rather than Karis LeVert. But I do think kind of sticking with your team identity is something that I would have liked to see more from the Cavs in that playoff series, because it does make it harder to assess, and we don't know what the health of Isaac Okoro was. There's a lot of aspects we don't know, but going into a season where we do have to kind of take a sober look at this roster and figure out what decisions need to be made, I kind of wish that we stuck with kind of the core identity a little more than we did in that series.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm going to move to my next question, Justin, which is, how much do the Cavs really like the rest of their roster? You know, I think that we can take Kobe at his word that the core four are safe, and are, you know, our group he really believes in. But what I'm really interested to figure out is, you know, how confident is this franchise in Dean Wade after an injury derailed his season? Are you know, and that reflects in both the kinds of moves they make in free agency and, you know, potential trades. You know, what willingness do they have to include some of these players who played minutes for a very, very good team in the regular season that, let's call it what it is, failed in the postseason? You know,
Giannis disagrees, but proceed.
Yeah, Giannis definitely disagrees. But you know, like how like, do you, like, for example, something that's super interesting to me is looking at that mid-level exception, looking at this free agent class, Justin, and we talk about a guy like Grant Williams. His name is going to come up, and I'm in half of our Discord just recoiled because they're sick of talking about Grant Williams while he's not even getting on the floor for Boston. But let's just throw it all out there. We'll call him Harrison Barnes. Doesn't matter. Okay. You know, do they believe in Dean Wade enough to say, we don't need that archetype. We don't want another 3-4 because we think Dean is going to give those minutes. Or are they okay? Because the reality is, if you sign Harrison Barnes, if you sign Grant Williams to mid-level money, Dean Wade probably falls out of the rotation or darn close to it. That's just a natural. So it kind of cuts both ways with the kinds of transactions they make to say how much, you know, who do they really still want to stay invested in, because certain roster decisions are going to preclude the on-court development of these players. You know, yeah. Royce O'Neal, if they find a way to trade for Royce O'Neal, and again, I'm just throwing out names, that, you don't think Isaac Okoro's minutes share goes way down if they add Royce O'Neal? So it's like, where do they invest? Who are they comfortable bumping out of guaranteed rotation minutes? Because I don't know the answer where this team values these players right now.
Yeah, and if I had to make a guess in terms of who they're going to bring in, just based on the history of how Kobe Altman's operated, I think he's going to value a skill set more than the archetype. And whoever gets bumped, but whoever the best movement shooter is, they're going to try to bring him in, right? Like, they went unconventional bringing in Lauri Markkanen. Well, we need ball handling badly. Well, we got 6'7" Karis LeVert is the best available option. He splits the difference between what we're missing with Sexton and what we're missing with Rubio, because he is a good playmaker and he is able to give you kind of that scoring in bunches. So let's get him. I think the skill set's going to be prioritized, but I do think that that's an important question that you bring. And again, it ties into my question, which is, do the Cavs believe they can develop Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, and and Darius Garland in particular, all at the same time? Because there are only so many developmental reps available within a season, and they got to make some decisions here. Like, I do think, and it's funny because I wrote this question in the rundown prior to the last 2 weeks here, and there's been speculation that's come up. Chris Fedor reported, they will look at the sign and trade market. They will look to see if there's someone that's available where they would aggregate guys like an Okoro and all these other players potentially to look at what options are available. And I'm skeptical that would come to fruition. I just don't see the kind of player that would be worthwhile for such a trade to being available. And then it's going to come down to, okay, if that's not there and you get someone for the mid-level exception and maybe you do a smaller trade for a couple second-round picks and you round out the roster that way, do you feel that you can develop and maximize Darius Okoro and Mobley at the same time? Because there is going to be experimenting with that. And my question to you, Carter, is if the answer is yes, and we get leaps from all three of them, what does that look like in terms of how their roles, like what would you say their roles are if all three of them took a leap of some sort next year?
I think Mobley, here's the thing that remains the Mobley cheat code from an archetype perspective is none of his leaps have to come with crazy volume and domination of the ball. And crazy shot volume. Like all of his leaps can just be a little bit better finishing in the short roll and a better jumper that draws the attention of the defense away a little bit more from the paint. So like I don't think Evan's development really takes much away from you, nor do I really think Darius's. I think
But do you think it can happen with all of them starting, like Isaac Okoro at starting small forward with the spacing concerns of Mobley and Allen in there?
Sure. To be honest, man, I think this is a spot where we disagree a little bit on Okoro, because I still think Okoro hasn't shown enough on offense. Okay. We were talking off pod about a guy like Bruce Brown, and you're like, he does all the same things that you'd want Okoro to do. And I'm like, I don't think Okoro can do the things Bruce Brown is doing for Denver right now. And Denver obviously has, awesome. It's the Bruce Brown dream destination. Like, he fits so like a glove there. They're big on the front court. They've got great spacing at the 3, the 3 and the 5. And like, I get it, but I still don't think Okoro has shown that level of craft as an attacker, as a playmaker, as a finisher with touch. And like, I think Okoro just has to get better at attack. Like, I still see him like attack a soft closeout where it's like, hey, if his skill set were a little bit more refined, if he were a little bit more developed, he would get a bucket here, and he doesn't. He will, dribble him. He'll be a little bit too tight on the attack, and he won't get a good clean angle. A lot of his finishes are still these crazy circus type of finishes because he's not consistently generating good angles for himself. Like, I think we just disagree a little bit about where Isaac is as a player, not just as a shooter. I think we probably agree with each other as a shooter where he is, but I think, and I see this in our Discord a little bit. I know this is a thing DH in the Discord always talks about how the offense doesn't really allow him to develop. I'm like, well, buddy, I think he's getting chances. Like, you have to show it. So I think I just a little bit disagree with where Okoro is, because I don't think a leap from him precludes anything. I don't subscribe to this idea, Justin, that like Okoro, like the Cavs situation is so hard on Isaac that he can't grow here. I just don't buy it.
Yeah, I don't buy that either. And honestly, some of this is probably on me. I probably just didn't do an effective enough job of communicating my point. My point when it comes to someone like Bruce Brown is, if you are going to run those type of actions, it's not going to be as effective, but I'd like to do it with Okoro, because I think that he can grow in those areas. And if you're going to get creative, having someone that's not a volume shooter that, has that kind of body type that's able to set some screens, and they did more of it as the season progressed. I would like to see that with Okoro, just because I think that there's, go ahead.
I understand that, and I get what you're saying, but I do want to push back and say, Bruce Brown didn't start getting those actions run for him. He earned those actions. By demonstrating that touch, by demonstrating that feel, by being that garbage man for those Brooklyn teams where you go, oh man, this guy is doing everything this team needs on the offensive end of the floor. I think he earned those reps in a way I do not think Isaac has yet, and that's coming from I'm a big Isaac fan. I wanted more. I wanted way more Isaac than we got in the postseason, but I do think we're doing his development a bit of a disservice if we're just saying, well, Bruce Brown gets cooler stuff run for him. And I know that's not what you're saying.
Yeah, but, no, I get it.
But I do think I just want to throw down the gauntlet a little bit. I want to say, Isaac, show me more craft. Show me that touch, because I think he can do it. But I just haven't seen it to the level he needs to justify a bit of a janky jumper that he can't always rely on. Because Bruce Brown's jumper is not almost any better. He shoots like 36% on like 3.5 attempts a game, but he makes the offense flow in a way that I still think Isaac does not.
Yeah, and I do think that the Cavs could get that out of him, right? And I think you're right that he's going to need to earn those opportunities. Like, I do think that you've seen over the last couple of years that the offense will evolve to allow you to showcase a skill set if you've developed it. Like, I think as Evan Mobley got better, they put more on his plate. Like, they started with some things on his plate and it was clear he wasn't ready for it. That went away. And then come January, Evan Mobley took a step forward and it was like, okay, well, now that you're showing it, we're going to give you more reps. As Okoro started moving more without the ball, you start using him as a screener. You started to use him a little more as a cutter. So I do think as he refines that skill set, it's going to open up opportunities. And that's one of the reasons why I have been a JB believer, is because the scheme has adapted to the talent. And I do wonder, he just turned 22 years old. He's the same age as Evan Mobley. Isaac Okoro, now that he went through last offseason, changing the form of his jumper, which is something that's so insanely involved, and I do think it paid off. Like, I think the jump shot looks better. Now that you have that as a foundation, maybe you can work on those other things. Maybe you can work on how you attack closeouts, how you create angles, how becoming a better finisher, learning how to draw that contact, all those kind of swing skill sets that allow you to be utilized in more ways offensively. Maybe that becomes easier this offseason. And I'm a big believer in Okoro as well. I understand that given the situation, he's probably going to be the name that comes up the most in trade conversations this summer. But I'm still a believer in him. But when it comes to the development, like the two that I'm going to prioritize, it's going to be Darius Garland, it's going to be Evan Mobley. And I think you're correct in pointing out that I don't think Mobley's development takes away from anyone. In fact, I probably think it opens up opportunities. But that's going to be one of those tough questions that the front office is going to have to assess this summer is, okay, how much development can we realistically get from multiple guys at once here?
That's fair. But I also just think like a fully developed Isaac Okoro on this team should be the perfect utility infielder. And so like that, all these, the nice thing,
theoretical Okoro fits, man.
Yeah, the nice thing about all these Cavs young dudes is that all their development kind of fits like a glove if they stay on the curve. But they have to stay on the curve. They have to or exceed the curve.
Looked ready for it. He looked ready for it in the postseason too.
I think so. I still think there was some offensive. There were some games where he was a lot out of control. And you cannot take away the fact that he's just not getting guarded. Like, it still matters that he's not being guarded. Even and we even saw this with PJ Tucker in the second round, where even when PJ had good games, they weren't guarding him and mucking up Joel Embiid actions. And like, sometimes the reputation just matters, and you have to not just be able to hit 37% on open threes. You have to be able to hit 46% on open threes over the course of a series to actually make teams change the way they're guarding you. You have to have that, a guy like Max Strus, who, I'm going to be, whose game I just love, 48% from the corners. You will lose if you do not guard him there. Mm-hmm. Even if Okoro continues to improve and hits 37% on 5 attempts a game in the postseason, on uber duper wide open threes, that might not move the needle enough. So to the point of his development,
if defenses can muck up what's happening with Darius Donovan and Mobley, right?
Absolutely.
Like they will take you hitting 3 out of 5 threes.
Absolutely.
Like that's just reality.
So like that, you have to do something to change the calculus. I think, again, going back to Bruce Brown, he has changed the calculus over the course of his career, where I don't think teams respect his jumper, but they respect his IQ, his handle, his playmaking, his floater game, to the point where they go, well, we can't just ignore the guy. We have to pay attention because he's so freaking smart. He'll kill us if we don't. Those are the bars I think a guy like Isaac needs to clear, because to your development question, the Cavs, like it or not, are running out of time to learn hard lessons. You can't let this happen 3 years in a row. You have to start making choices that say, okay, again, going back to the, quote unquote, easier decisions, it's a lot easier to swap out your fifth starter, or make a consolidation trade with a young player that is fifth or sixth in your rotation instead of second or third. So Isaac's going to have to go prove it. And I don't think this is as much a Cavs problem as it is an Isaac problem. I think he needs to just keep getting better. And I think he's going to do everything in his power to do that. Whether it works or not, who knows? It's a hard league. The fit is suboptimal because, again, like as much as I can wax poetic about Bruce Brown, he gets to play next to Michael Porter Jr., KCP, Jamal Murray, and Nikola Jokic, who are all amazing three-point shooters, and amazing spacers and savants. Like it's not it's not a one-to-one situation, but like the reality is you just got to find a way to make it work, and maybe he'll make it work somewhere else. But it's a hard league, man. It's so hard to be the fifth guy on a championship level team. There are so many great players in this league who have not been able to hit that threshold.
Yeah, it's a damn high bar. And one thing that ties into both of my questions and ties into what I've seen in the playoffs is you need a hub. Like, you need that guy that makes everything run when teams are frazzled, when things are getting a little hairy. And I think, like, when you see inconsistency with Boston, I think it comes down to them not having kind of a pure point guard. I think Miami's able to generate it with how good Bam is as a playmaker, and the IQ of guys like Jimmy, Lowry, Vincent. Denver obviously has that with Jokic, and I think Jamal's a better playmaker than he gets credit for. I do think going into next year, in terms of changing approach to the regular season and in terms of leap that I want to see, I want the keys in Darius's hand. I think the Cavs are at their best when Darius is being aggressive, and I think, like, I won't dox our good buddy, but we do have someone that I really respect their opinion, that says, I already think that Darius is the best player on the Cavs, and I'm not going that far, even as a Darius believer. I think Donovan was the clear all-NBA guy, but I think Darius is closer to that level than he gets credit for. And I think this Cavs offense is at its best when Darius is running the show. I think it makes absolutely everybody better. And I think there were too many times where, even though there wasn't a your turn, my turn with Donovan and Darius, I do think that Darius can be a little too passive at times. And even though that 2-3 seconds of, okay, well, who's going to initiate now? I think speeding that up and centering the offense around Darius Garland, I do think that that's going to pay dividends. And I think him ratcheting up that aggressiveness, taking 8 threes a game, 8-9 threes a game, being that guy that, all right, I'm getting us into our sets a little bit quicker, being that guy that's starting the possessions where Donovan can end them and run the second unit and be his awesome self off of him. I don't think that takes away from Donovan, but I do think that more assertiveness out of Darius Garland is going to make this team better, because when they look their best against the New York Knicks, it was Garland doing that. It was Garland in game 2, Garland in game 4 in that second half where he had a tough half and he came out there. Like, it's ridiculous that with how bad game 3 was, he still averaged 21 points per game on like good efficiency and shot well from the floor. Like, that's how good he was at every other stage of this kind of short 5-game series. Like, I think Darius has another gear, and honestly, as much as we're focusing on the Mobley leap, and that's going to dictate the ceiling of this team, I think for next year, a Garland leap, another step as he turns 24 years old, I do think that can move the needle just as much as anything else with this team.
Yeah, you got right to the point I was preparing to make, which is that in a series where the Cavs offense was absolutely garbage, the only times it looked great was when Darius was being assertive, and generating shots. Second half of game 4, as you point, he was the one who kind of calmed the team down and got them back into generating good offense. Game 2, obviously, even the first quarter of game 3, his nightmare game, he was generating, I thought, good looks for the team by being the aggressor. Now, none of them went in, and then I really thought he lost the plot. So I don't want to give him credit for game 3, where I thought he did have a very, very bad game, not just from a shot making perspective. Though obviously
the decision making went off.
I thought he lost kind of trust in his process in that game. So I'm not calling that a good game by any means, but I think he was their best road to consistently good offense, because hey, he's a point guard. He's a pure point guard. And pure point guards at their best get you great looks. And get you into rhythm. Whether you happen to be a 7-footer in Denver or a 6'1", 6'2" height watch point guard in Cleveland. So I agree with you there, and I think it's a very, very salient point that because he's not a super athlete, I think there is a degree of folks that probably feel like, okay, well, he's just going to be kind of what he is, and it's either going to be good enough or it's not. But he is still young, he is still growing, he's still working on his game, and I still think there's a lot.
Mitchell made it 26, right?
I still think there's a lot of meat on the bone for Darius.
I do too, and I just keep coming back to, like, there were times this season where the Cavs did look frazzled in the half court, and that happened a lot against the Knicks. And this wasn't the first time that Donovan's had a tough playoff series, right? Like, there's been times, obviously last year against Dallas and other times in his career where the shots just haven't fallen. Right, where things just get a little bit tougher, and I do think having a dynamic All-NBA type talent point guard can make life easier for him. And if Darius puts it on his shoulder that I'm not going to let the team get frazzled, I'm going to be the one that gets us good looks in the half court, I do think that level of assertiveness makes life easier for Donovan. It allows him to be the dynamic player that he can be, and get those steals in passing lanes and get the good shots off of Darius. And Evan Mobley, he's just such an intelligent player that when you're being assertive and he knows where you need to go, where he needs to go off ball and what passing lanes he needs to get into, that's when Mobley looks his best. When everyone's standing around and, okay, well, who's going to get things going now? That indecision is what makes it harder to get guys like Evan Mobley and Jared Allen going. So I do think next year, really prioritizing Garland running the show and having him be more assertive. And again, just like your Isaac point, I do think that it comes down to Garland. Like, I think he can very easily, with the same possessions that he had, just take a few more pull-ups, just be a little more assertive in these spots, refine those skills, understanding that you're going to need to be the guy that does these things. I think it does come down to him to earn that opportunity, especially when you are teammates with someone as talented as Donovan Mitchell. But that is a change that I don't think would take away from anybody else on this team.
Absolutely, bud. I think we just solved the Cavs. We did it.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Look at that. We got months to spare too. This is terrific.
Well, the free agency is so far away.
Did you know that the draft lottery is tomorrow?
I just saw it, and it's so weird just knowing we're not going to have to care. We're not going to care about this thing for a cool 6 years.
I had literally no idea that it was tomorrow, and that's surprising given how much Wemby hype there's been. But you know what? We'll get to be just spectators for that, and then next year we're going to have to do draft coverage as well with the pick in 2024. But you know what? I am appreciating kind of having a 1-year break from us attempting to talk about the draft. We'll have an expert on later on, closer to the draft, when everything,
second round happen. Sleeper season.
Yeah, second round sleepers. We'll bug someone that we like and respect that can give us a rundown there. But if you expect us, 14 was hard enough. If you expect us to be talking about mid-second rounds and realistic targets for multiple months, you're going to be very disappointed over the next couple of weeks. Let me tell you that, buddy.
Well, we people are often going to be disappointed when they listen to the Chase Down podcast, Justin.
It's brand consistency. It is what it is. Hopefully we weren't too disappointed today. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. We really do appreciate you guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast, you can leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Be sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.